Our adventure took a sinister twist when we noticed a pair of children's shoes drifting near the lake's edge, one ominously stained with blood. This unsettling discovery, combined with our earlier encounter with the eerie couple in the car, sent chills down our spines, compelling me and my siblings to abandon our fishing trip.
A couple of weeks ago, I decided to go for a long walk in the woods near my small town, which has fewer than 1,000 people. This town is far away from any big cities, making it a quiet and tight-knit community. The woods around the town are flat, with some ponds and small rivers scattered about. My plan for the day was to hike to one of these rivers. Although I had been to this river several times before, I had never camped there. I knew from past visits that walking north to the river would take about 3 hours. The woods are usually very quiet, the perfect place for someone who wants to be alone with nature. But little did I know what would happen next, that it would scare me for the rest of my life. The quiet was unexpectedly broken when I ran into another person, about 45 minutes away from the river. It was highly unusual to meet someone else here, since this was not an official hiking trail, but just a stretch of open woods. We almost walked right into each other and stopped short, both surprised. We looked at each other, both a bit nervous. After a moment, the other man quickly smiled, stepped aside, and then started running away. It was very creepy and scary at the same time. Shaken by this strange encounter, but still determined, I continued to the river and set up my camp as the sun was setting. I planned to build a fire and enjoy a night under the stars away from the town lights, where I could see the Milky Way clearly. However, as the night grew darker, my peace was disturbed again, this time by the sound of quiet footsteps approaching from behind. I turned around, but couldn't see anyone in the dim light. The footsteps stopped as soon as I turned, as if whoever was making them knew they had been noticed. Feeling both curious and worried, I took my flashlight and decided to check it out. I walked towards where I had heard the footsteps, shining my flashlight around. Suddenly, the light fell on the same man I had encountered earlier, standing quietly, about 20 feet away. The man was just standing there, blending into the dark. So, just your typical day, with 2 creepy encounters with the same dude. No cause for concern, right? Trying to stay calm, I acted as if I hadn't seen the man, casually moving the flashlight around as if I was just checking the area. I then walked back to my camp, keeping an eye out for the man until he was out of sight. Once back at camp, I quickly packed up my things. I no longer felt safe. I looked around one last time, then left my campsite and fire behind, walking back along the river. Once I felt I was far enough away, I started running, not stopping until I was sure I was far from any danger. As I approached the edge of the woods, exhausted and jittery, I saw a figure emerging from the trees ahead. My heart raced until I realized it was a familiar face. Officer Daniels, our town's sheriff. He looked surprised to see me, and I quickly explained my encounter. His expression turned serious, and he walked me back to his patrol car. As we drove back to town, Officer Daniels told me something shocking. There had been reports of someone watching hikers and campers in the area for months, but they had never been able to catch him. My description matched the man they suspected, someone who used to live in the town but had disappeared years ago after being accused of several creepy incidents. My blood ran cold as I understood just how narrowly I had escaped danger. Officer Daniels promised they would step up patrols in the area and urged me to stick to well-traveled paths from now on. Back in the safety of my home, I couldn't shake the encounter from my mind. I never went back for my tent, which I had left behind in my rush. I was left with many questions. Who was the man? What were his intentions? Why did he disappear so suddenly? Even though the experience was scary, it made me realize that being alone in the woods can sometimes be unpredictable. While I continued to hike and enjoy the nature around my town, I became more careful, always aware of my surroundings and the possibility of unexpected meetings. This encounter made me respect the wilderness and its mysteries even more.
A few weeks back, I decided to spend a quiet weekend camping by a serene lake close to where I live. I'm not one for long hikes, typically sticking to trails just a mile or two long. This particular trail, just over a mile from my campsite to the trailhead where my truck was parked, is familiar and manageable. I plan to enjoy the peaceful outdoors and maybe get some fishing done. On the third morning of my getaway, I trekked back to my truck to grab my fishing gear and some additional food supplies, then headed back to camp. I looked forward to a leisurely day of fishing by the lake. Upon my return, however, I noticed an unexpected change. Another tent was now set up by the edge of the lake. Curiously, there was no sign of anyone around the tent. At first, I thought little of it, considering that there might be another path to that part of the lake I wasn't aware of. With no one in sight, I shrugged off the unease and prepared my fishing rod to make the most of the time I had. Throughout the afternoon, as I fished, I occasionally glanced towards the mysterious tent, but I never saw anyone. By the time the sun began to set, I packed up my gear and went back to my own tent. I gathered some sticks along the way for a campfire, planning to enjoy the evening under the stars. After darkness fell, I lit my campfire. Almost immediately, I noticed a shadow move in the forest ahead. The figure was just out of reach of the light, and after that quick glimpse, the area plunged back into darkness. I reasoned it was probably the person from the tent, gathering firewood, and tried not to think too much about it. Settling back into my chair, I let the calming effects of the fire, the night sky, and the lake soothe me. It was so tranquil that I nearly fell asleep. However, about 30 minutes later, my peace was abruptly shattered. Several figures emerged from the forest and approached my campsite. As they came closer, illuminated by the campfire, I saw that they were 4 men, appearing to be in their 30s or 40s, with serious expressions. A wave of nervousness washed over me as I stood up and asked if they needed help, but they didn't reply. Instead, they continued walking towards me. 2 of the men headed straight for my tent, while the others began to aggressively usher me away from the campsite. It became clear to me that these men were there not for friendly reasons, but to rob me. Realizing that resistance might escalate the situation, I watched helplessly as 2 of the men rummaged through my belongings, while the others kept pushing me further into the woods. The more they pushed me away from the campsite and into the darkness, the more my anxiety grew. They moved me deep into the woods, away from any source of light, and everything around us was pitch black. I tried to talk to them, to plead with them, but their blank expressions showed no sign of empathy or understanding. In my mind, I kept repeating that I needed to stay calm and let them take whatever they wanted. However, when they briefly stopped moving and one of the men reached into his jacket, panic took over. Seizing the moment, I turned and ran as fast as I could, the sound of my footsteps echoing loudly in the silent woods. I didn't stop, driven by sheer adrenaline, until I found the trail that led back to my truck. Thankfully, it appeared that none of the men followed me. I drove straight to the nearest police station to report the incident. Although I was unharmed, almost all my camping gear was stolen, and there was no trace of the men left behind. The police could do little without any evidence or leads on who the men were, or what exactly they intended by dragging me into the forest. The possibilities of what could have happened lingered in my mind, and I felt incredibly lucky to have escaped potentially grave danger. As I reflected on the ordeal, a chilling thought crept into my mind. What if the men weren't after my belongings, but something far more sinister? What if they had intended to lure unsuspecting campers into the woods for a more sinister purpose? The realization sent shivers down my spine, and from that day forward, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched whenever I ventured into the wilderness. This harrowing experience had not only robbed me of my belongings, but also my sense of security in the great outdoors.
Years ago, my family and I used to go camping frequently on weekends, especially during the warmer months. Our favorite spot was an area known for its natural beauty and outdoor activities. We'd drive about 30 miles out of town along a country road before hitting a dirt road that led up a mountain. This place wasn't just perfect for hiking, it offered dirt biking, shooting, and other adventures too. We loved exploring the forest, often taking less traveled paths that led to secluded spots. One such path led to an old abandoned quarry, which was like a playground for us kids during our camping trips. Despite its allure, the quarry and its surroundings were usually empty. This meant we could always find the best camping spots, flat, spacious, and secluded. Our camping setup was simple: a tent, a table with folding chairs, and a fire pit surrounded by stones. We'd spend our days doing various activities like target practice with BB guns under our dad's watchful eye, collecting firewood, carving small wooden figurines, or just relaxing and reading. But the best part of our trips was always heading to the lake. Near our camp, there was a fork in the road leading to an old, now closed path that used to go down to the lake. Because of limited parking and safety concerns, this access had been shut down, and a new entrance with better facilities was built decades ago. So the old road was forgotten, which was great for us kids because we could go down to the lake without any adult supervision, making it feel like our very own private getaway. One morning, we decided to fish at sunrise. We prepared our equipment and walked down the dusty road toward the old blockade gate that marked the beginning of the old access road to the lake. As we approached the gate, we noticed a car parked right in front, which was unusual but not alarming, since some people still knew about this old route. As we passed the car, we saw a man and a woman inside chatting quietly. The man cheerily greeted us, asking about our parents. We explained that they were back at the campsite, and after a brief exchange, we just continued on our way to the lake. However, our excitement turned to fear when we spotted a pair of children's shoes floating near the shore, one stained with blood. This, combined with the encounter with the couple, made us cut our trip short and hurry back to camp. Back at camp, we told our parents what we had seen. They were concerned, but didn't know what to do about it. We remained cautious for the rest of our stay, the unsettling events at the lake putting a damper on the rest of the trip. Later that evening, as we were preparing dinner, we heard distant sirens approaching the area. Curious, our dad went to investigate and returned with a grim expression. He informed us that the couple we had seen earlier were suspects in the murder of a family nearby, and that the blood-stained shoes were likely evidence of that horrible crime. The revelation was shocking, realizing that during our trip, we had unknowingly come into close contact with cold-blooded criminals. It was a sobering reminder of the danger that's out there in the world, even in the midst of nature's tranquility.